Welcome to the NOSA Unleashed podcast, where we want to expose and remove the stigma surrounding mental health by discussing real life challenges and obstacles that keep us paralyzed and fearful to move forward. Let us inspire you to believe there is more to life than what you are currently experiencing. Now is the time to end the silence and pursue the path to purpose and fulfillment. We will do this together because no one stands alone. Welcome back to the NOSA Unleashed podcast. I'm Laura Burgoyne, and I'm joined here with my sister, Connie Blackwood. And we're continuing the conversation from last time about the culture of honor. But more specifically, today, we wanted to talk about coming from a place of love and cultivating love. Because, like Connie mentioned at the end of our podcast last time, love and honor actually are symbiotic, they go hand in hand, and the relationship between the two um, is so vital and so important that we can't have one without the other, honestly. And when we are struggling with the honor piece, if we look at the situation from the eyes of love, then it can help us to step back into honor, and vice versa. And so we want to talk a little bit more about this, and even some strategies of how can you come from a place of love. And honestly, really, it comes down to shifting perspectives. So, how can we shift our perspectives when it comes to conflict, when it comes to situations with others in our life, and how can we see things from a different point of view? So, Connie, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this. Right off the hop, the thing that pops into my mind is trying to understand the other person's heart, right?
Hmm.
Because it's one thing to understand their words and be able to repeat them back. It's another thing to understand what motivated that, what their heart is behind it, and what they're actually feeling. Because sometimes our language is weak, right? It's the weakest part of our communication. There's body language, there's so much other stuff going on that is the majority of how we communicate. And even the inflection in our voice, you can say the same 7 words, but depending on which word you put the inflections on, will depend on what it actually means to somebody. And so it's so complex when we use language that we need to be cautious. And
Hmm.
so, but being able to understand that person's heart is a whole different thing. And I've been trying this with my husband. And ever since I've been trying this with my husband the last few weeks, I've seen a change in the way that we deal with one another. And I've actually feel much deeper connected to him because I actually know what's going on in his heart and his mind. And he's more willing to share that with me. And he wasn't before because he knows I'm seeking to understand that piece and not just his words. And I think it has really changed the way that we communicate. And I'm just like blown away by how I never really focused on this before. I think
Hmm.
it was natural early on in our relationship, but it stopped being natural. We learn all these tools on how to make our relationship better, and it's about using our words better and more effectively, which is a good tool. But I feel like we focused so much on that, we lost understanding each other's hearts in the process.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, especially if we're in a heightened emotional state,
Mm-hmm.
or a situation's difficult to talk about, you know, we might not be able to come up with the right words, right? And so the words that we do use aren't clearly communicating what's actually going on inside of us. And if someone were to take us at our word, take us at
Mm-hmm.
face value, there could be a lot of misunderstanding. And
Mm-hmm.
so, even coming from the perspective, okay, you know, what my friend, my spouse, my brother, my sister, my parent, whoever this person is in our life, what they're saying isn't congruent with who I know they are, right? Their
Mm-hmm.
character, the way they think. So I'm going to purposely not take this to heart and seek to understand where this came from. Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
behind this? What is underlying this? Because this isn't normal for this person to be, maybe they're being rude, maybe they're having an outburst. right? Maybe they're, saying things that are unkind. Whatever it is, like, if that's not the normal for that person, I think it's important that we slow down and we seek to understand the deeper picture, what actually is happening under the scenes, because maybe they felt unheard earlier in the day. Like, maybe they felt like they were steamrolled. Maybe they feel like they don't have a voice in this relationship, right? You never know what that thing is. But I think it's important that, we don't necessarily take people at their word and what the words are saying, and actually seek to find out what they mean by that, right? And I
Mhm.
even find this with my kids, right? My son, one of my sons actually will say something and I'm like, "Okay, I don't get it. Like, it doesn't make sense." And so one of the ways you deal with that is you ask more questions, clarifying questions, right? You almost become like an investigator instead of assuming, right? And I know we talked about this before, but it is so powerful to not just immediately assume and then, get triggered yourself and then respond yourself. Like, almost be like a detective, like, what is going on here and why is this happening? Like, don't be so quick to get offended that you then get your back up and then you start, responding for that, because it could be completely unnecessary. Whatever's happening in
Mhm.
that situation could have absolutely nothing to do with me, but yet I just made it about me, right? And
Mhm.
so we need to become more quick to investigate and be willing to look at the deeper issues and not take it at face value.
And cultivating that curiosity is important. Like, if you're not good at that, then learn how to be good at it, right? Like, find ways, find questions, find, people who've done it before and ask them how they approach it, right? Like, learn from other
Mhm.
people, right?
Another thing that I actually do and I'm working on is, trying to even perceive, okay, this person's totally dysregulated right now. They are,
Mhm.
being unrational, unreasonable. And so even, slowing down and thinking about, okay, what has been going on in this person's life?
Mhm.
Like, what has their day been like? Who have they encountered? What are the stresses that are they having? Like, and almost like walking a mile in their shoes,
Mhm.
right? Because if we don't try to understand where someone's coming from and maybe all the things they've been exposed to that in that time, maybe all of the things that they're carrying, the stresses, the burdens, you know, if we don't take those kind of things into consideration, there can be a whole lot of miscommunication and misunderstandings that are completely unnecessary. And this happens a lot in my marriage with my husband. But when I can come from the perspective of, okay, you know what? He's had a really long day. He's worked 14 hours. He's had 3 or 4 difficult customers. He just had 3 really hard phone calls, or maybe he hurt himself on the job site. He's in a lot of pain. Like, when you take some of those things into consideration, it's like, you know what? He's not being his normal self, right? And then it's easier for me to be like, I'm not gonna take this personally right now because I believe this has nothing to do with me. And then ask him more questions about his day or how I can support him, or, what does he need in that moment, right? Instead of making it about like, you just yelled at me or you just did it, whatever, right? And
Mhm.
making it about me instead of recognizing that, he's struggling right now. And maybe I need
Mhm.
to be walking a mile in his shoes and, be coming from a place of love and honor him in that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of having grace for people, right? Like, grace is unmerited favor. They, in that moment may, in your view, not deserve for you to be, so loving and kind to them and whatever. But at the same time, that's what grace is all about. When you're kind to someone who's angry at you, it's really hard for them to stay angry. When you're loving towards them, it's really hard for them to stay in that place. and not reciprocate. And so, as hard as it is in those heightened moments, we do need to take the step back and be the first person to show love, the first person to show grace. And, like Laura was saying, ask those key questions and find out what else has been going on in their life. And as soon as we turn on the switch to being more loving, a lot of times those defensive walls do come down, or at least get pulled back a little for some people who have built those walls pretty high and pretty wide. Another thing that comes to mind is, you know, being quick to forgive people and ask forgiveness is another
Mhm.
key way of shifting our perspective in these moments. So it's important to do both, and then be quick to resolve conflict. you know, that is being quick to show grace. That is being quick to ask questions versus stand your ground, like we were saying last week or in our last podcast.
Another thing I thought of too, Connie, is I've had situations where, like, sometimes I'll be honest, sometimes I can be difficult, right? I get
Mm-hmm.
obstinate. I have my point of view. I want to get it across, and I can be unrelenting in whoever's I'm talking to, right? And I've encountered situations where I've been on the receiving end of that. And it's interesting that, when I'm experiencing what that feels like, it actually helps me to be like, oh my gosh, when I am like that, that's how someone feels,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's helping me shift my thinking and myself to be like, I don't want anyone to feel the way that I just felt. How I felt dismissed,
Mm-hmm.
how I felt devalued, how I felt like I didn't matter, right? And so in those moments, it's like I've actually taken those moments and been like, I need to change. There's things in me, things in
Mm-hmm.
my communication style, in how, I sometimes do want to be right. I need to change that because I don't want someone else to be experiencing what I'm experiencing right now, which is a lot of hurt, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
frustration, a lot of, um, you know, feelings like I don't even want to talk to this person anymore. And, I don't even know if I want to talk to them again, right? Like when you feel in a relationship that what you have to say doesn't matter and you're being dismissed and you're being devalued, then why would you want to talk to that person?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you want to be in relationship? And so, I think that's another way we can shift perspective too, is recognizing when, you know, something that we're feeling in a communication is something that we actually do ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then shifting that in our own walk so that we are not putting that onto someone else. We're not making someone else feel that way. And I've been challenged in this a lot in the last 2 years. And it's come from really unlikely sources, people that, I'm not normally in relationship with and I don't normally have issues with. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And then I recognize, you know what, I do this sometimes. And I feel grieved. Like, I don't want anyone to have to experience that from me. I want them to feel honored. I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel respected. I want them to feel like what they say matters and it is important. And so how many times do I not do that? Right? So I have to look at myself.
And I think even when you're thinking about it in those terms, what do you want the outcome to be? Like, what do you want that person to walk away feeling? What would you like to walk away feeling, right? Like, putting that into the atmosphere. Like, if you want them to feel loved, supported, uplifted, encouraged, how do you get from where you are now to there, right? And being able to think about that in the midst of the conflict or the chaos that's going on is a key that I think is a good thing to cultivate as well, right? along with the curiosity. Like it's a skill that you're gonna have to practice, right? Because we're not used to recognizing what we do and what the fallout is. We're not used to that. We're used to like protecting ourselves, but not necessarily recognizing what outcome do we want from this conversation? How do we want them to be feeling walking away from this conversation? Not even just about the conversation, but about me, right? Like, how do I want them to be feeling towards me when they leave this conversation? And so it really does change the way that you talk to people when you focus on that. Like, you know, I drive my mother around every Wednesday. Do we have always a positive conversation? Not always. But when I focus on what I want the outcome to be, I'm more at peace. I'm more calm, even if, the day isn't going right and things are going sideways. I find I handle it much better on the days when I'm focused on what I want the outcome to be than when I'm focused on me. And so it actually has really helped me to have more peace on those days. And like, you know, we're driving around all day in traffic, it can be stressful. And so I'm not always the nicest person when I'm stressed out from traffic. But I found that ever since I've been focused on how I want my mom to feel for the rest of the day after experiencing a morning with me, it has shifted the way that I am, even in the midst of people almost hitting me by cutting me off.
Right. I think another thing too we can focus on is, just being willing to forgive quickly.
Mhm,
Like, do I really want whatever conflict that is happening to continue? Do I want that to be the end of the story? Like you said, how do you want mom to feel at the end of it? Well, how do you want the outcome to be? Like, it's the same when it comes to resolving conflict. Like, how do I want this situation to end?
mhm,
Right? And being willing to do what it takes to resolve that quickly.
mhm,
And maybe that means I need to apologize. Maybe that
mhm,
means I need to clarify. Maybe that means I need to be more vulnerable and actually share my heart and share what's happening, because a lot of times some of these misunderstandings happen because the other person has no idea what's going on in my life. And that
mhm,
actually happened earlier this week. Like, I was having a really bad morning and I was feeling so emotional, and my husband was perceiving that somehow he was responsible for what was going on in my life. And, he took the time to ask more questions. You know, tell me more what's going on in your life. Like, what are you thinking? What's going on inside of you? And, I shared a bit more what was going on in me inside of me, instead of him going through the day feeling like I was angry and frustrated and, all of these emotions because of him, and then it causing conflict between both of us. Like, we were able to get to the bottom of it and actually have, some resolution, or even, closeness, right? And he was able to comfort me in some of the things I was struggling with and just say, you know what, it's okay. We're going to get through this, all those kind of things. And so sometimes it takes us being vulnerable and sharing what's underlying, you know, whatever we're feeling, whether it's anxiety or frustration or anger or hurt. Like, why? Like, what's underneath that? And being willing to share that with others so they can understand, so that they can come alongside us and, you know, support us and love us, and not take it personally.
mhm,
Well, we've shared a lot of information with you, and I know that this is going to take time to process. I know even for myself and Connie, we still are working through these things, and it's real. Like, the struggle is real, and let's become from a place of strength and personal responsibility, and look at our part of relationships. Look at how we contribute, both positively and negatively, and how we can shift and create more honor in our relationships. And if you want to hear more about this, we do have our upcoming webinar, which is called Culture of Honor. We'll be talking more about this. and it's happening May 1st at 7 p.m. on Zoom. You can find more details on our website at nosafoundation.com, and you can also RSVP your spot there as well and make sure that you get all of the email reminders and the private link to that event. And so, yeah, we're gonna just close off there and wish you a great month and hope that you join us on May 1st at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Bye.
Bye.